So I'm happy to announce, first of all, that I've ditched these academic jobs. Today is my starting day at a little company in the US called Verizon. So I'd like to start by telling you something about my new company. Verizon is a communications company, which means that our job is to take information from point A and then deliver that information to point B. And if we feel like it, to point C, and to point D, and to point E. We have built massive infrastructure to make this work as smoothly and reliably as possible. We have lots of slogans that express our corporate commitment to communication. For example, for many years we were running ads where, it was really cute ads, there were these technicians, like a technician would show up in the ad and he would walk to some funny spot and then he would pull out his smartphone and say, "Can you hear me now?" And then you could imagine somebody on the other end saying, "Yes, I can hear you. Of course I can hear you because we've invested a lot in our network, Verizon. We understand how to build reliable networks. So, can you hear me now? Good." And then he would walk to somewhere else funny and say the same thing. And very nice ads. We're working on a new set of ads along these lines called "Can They Hear You Now?" There's some other slogans that you can find online. For example, "We never stop working for you. Don't ask who you is." "Rule the air." "Never settle." And actually, okay, my favorite one coming up, this is one that for me really expresses how I feel as a network provider, which is, "I am the man in the middle." I am the network, your data is my data, and I will do with it whatever I want. Now, what do I want to do with it? Well, the answer, of course, is to make money. That is our job. As a big corporation, we are required by law to do everything we can to make money. This is a fiduciary duty that we have to our stockholders. Example of this, there's an organization in the US called the NSA, which you've heard something about in previous talks, and NSA, according to NSA, Alice and Bob are suspected terrorists. So they pay us a lot of money. It's a sweet deal. They pay us a lot of money to deliver them some information about the communication between Alice and Bob. Most of this money is profit, hundreds of millions of US dollars, and we've really got the infrastructure working smoothly to make this communication happen. Again, we're trying to connect people to the information they need, and NSA is seemingly happy with this, but from our perspective, look, I should say this is obviously a pretty stupid way to catch terrorists. I mean, what kind of terrorist is named Alice? But anyway, it's not our job to be judgmental. It is our job to make money. And this, even though it might sound like a lot of money, it's not really a growth opportunity. We've already got something like half of the US population using cell phones with our service. Maybe we could get to 100% if we work really hard and kill all the other companies, but we're not about to expand outside the US. NSA only has a limited budget. Maybe we could sell the same information to some other governments, but NSA is actually also in that business, and we don't want to piss them off. So we can't really expand this market. But there's other ways that we can sell information, that we can make money by communicating information to people. For example, we have a new division for a few years called Precision Market Insights. And the job of this division is to connect you to the information you need, to make your life better by informing you about products and services that are of interest to you. This is often called advertising. And this is a way to make humanity better, to make the world a better place. I should say something about the technical details of what we're doing here. There's lots of standard ways to do this that involve your browser. Now, what happens, suppose that you search for health information online. You're doing a search for, say, sleep apnea. Now, maybe you're not asleep yet, it's late at night, you're using your smartphone in bed and searching for something about sleep apnea, like why is my partner snoring all the time? And okay, maybe it's not sleep apnea, maybe it's just excessive snoring, but in any case, you're searching online, and as a result of those searches, what happens is the website tells your browser, oh, by the way, inside this page, please grab something from a big data broker like Experian. And then Experian sees that your browser with Experian cookies is accessing that website. The website is telling your browser, here's the particular Experian page to load, which says sleep apnea and more information about you. And okay, now your browser, from Experian's perspective, is attached to sleep apnea and all the other information they have about you. The problem with this, why we can do better, The problem with this is what's called the mobile cookie problem. Now, suppose that you actually find yourself interested in purchasing sleep apnea devices, continuous positive air pressure devices. You're not actually typically going to purchase those on your smartphone. Typically, you're going to purchase from your laptop, or in 12% of cases, from your desktop. Now, your laptop machine, maybe it's using the same network. Maybe you have your smartphone as a hotspot, and your laptop is using the smartphone. But that doesn't mean that your browser on the laptop is the same as your browser on the smartphone. And those cookies that Experian has attached to your browser on the smartphone are not actually talking to your laptop browser. So how does Experian and all of the advertisers who are working with Experian data, how do they know to deliver ads to your laptop? Well, this is where we can do better because we are the network. We can actually recognize everything coming through your network connection, whether it's actually your smartphone or your laptop or your desktop or your friend's smartphone, whatever it is, we can direct this data recognizing that it's you. And we can even modify the data. So we have, for a few years now, been modifying. It was just a trial starting in 2012 with Kraft advertising to mothers of 6 to 11-year-old children. And then we started rolling it out on a bigger basis. What we do is we take your web connections, without your browser ever knowing about it, we put some extra information into your request to the server, which identifies that it's from your connection, which could be it's your smartphone or your laptop. It gets the same number, because we put that number in based on your phone number. And then, well, now those things have been linked. And now the data broker can take advantage of that and give you the ads that you need to make your life better. Okay. We have some press releases about this, of course. So we're working with these companies like Experian to send data around. And if these companies are partnering with us, they can actually get even more information about you, like what exactly your phone number is. For everybody else, your phone number is hashed. Now, hashing has also come up in a few of the previous talks. Hashing is magic crypto pixie dust, which takes personally identifiable information and makes it incomprehensible to the marketing department. When a marketing person looks at random letters and numbers, they have no idea what it means. They can't imagine that anybody could possibly understand the information, reverse the hash, correlate the hashes, track them, save them, record them, so the marketing department is able, with a straight face, to write things like, Verizon's data partners are not able to collect or save the data profiles. Of course, the vice president of the marketing division is not so stupid, so he says things like, there will probably be really rich algorithms that tie your multiple identities together. Good. So that means that in the future, even though there's this magic crypto pixie dust in the way, we will be able to work with our advertisers to bring you all the ads that you need. And if, by the way, you're worried about your friend using a smartphone to search for stuff for them and that being linked to you, yes, that's a little problem occasionally. It would be embarrassing if you got ads based on their searching, which is why we need more surveillance of what's going on so we can tell actually that it's your friend's smartphone and not your smartphone. The solution to this kind of accidental problem of excessive advertising is more data collection about the people who are using the network. Okay. Some people, for some reason, are a little annoyed sometimes, maybe because of incidents like Experian, this data broker that I mentioned before, selling information, lots of information, to an identity thieves service run in Vietnam called superget.info. I'm not actually sure what the difference is between a data broker and an identity thieves service, but it's not our job to be judgmental. It's our job to make money. So we look at a situation like this and say, okay, we're not Experian. We're working with Experian. And Experian is not some 24-year-old Vietnamese guy who's now in jail. Experian maybe was fined a little bit. We react to this sort of thing by saying that we care about privacy. So along with the corporate commitment to communication, we have a corporate commitment to talking about privacy, which leads us to say things like, we're not using or selling our first-party subscriber data, we're just partnering with data providers, whatever that means, which is totally different from selling data. Or we will never sacrifice our core business and our commitment to privacy because there's an additional dollar to be made by pumping data out into the ecosystem. Okay, as a result of not being obviously doing bad things, and as a result of saying these nice things, and Experian is even they're not getting in very much trouble. We're not really worried about a political backlash. This seems to be enough to talk about privacy without actually doing anything. On the other hand, there's something which really seems to be a threat for us. And this is what I'm going to focus on for my talk, which is the technical backlash. So this is a real threat on the horizon, which is the increasing deployment of crypto. And we can already see a little bit of what this is doing for us. Here's some official Verizon statements, which I can quote for you. What crypto does, it causes all sorts of problems for us. And problems for us are, of course, problems for you. First of all, it damages the network. Crypto makes the network slower. There's the CPU time, the bandwidth. There's fundamental failures that crypto creates in our mechanisms of managing the data flow. The way that the internet works requires us to have insight into the communication between people, including the contents of communications for simple features like caching. And if you care about delivering the internet to starving children in Africa, you really have to care about caching, otherwise it's too expensive for them. We care about having the network work. We are the experts on this. We've put a lot of work into this, and crypto screws it up because crypto messes up the data flow. Now, beyond that, crypto is a security problem. You see, we are monitoring the network. We are monitoring with deep packet inspection as much as we can of what goes to your machine, and we are stopping attacks. And crypto makes it hard for us to do that. So remember, crypto, it damages the network, and it makes your machine less secure. Furthermore, it stops us from delivering to you the information that you need in order to understand what products and services are out there that can make your life better. So crypto is a real threat. Now, what do we do? Well, maybe we can try to tell people, hey, just don't use crypto. Actually, for many years, this has worked just fine. When somebody's occasionally said, oh, I'll use crypto, then we tell them, oh, no, don't bother. It's so complicated, and it's not like you're doing anything useful anyway. It's annoying. It's complicated. So, okay, we, for example, as part of the Open Web Alliance, we have joined with a bunch of other companies. HTTP 2, 6 months ago, was going to have mandatory encryption. All HTTP version 2 connections were going to be required to have crypto, with serious encryption of everything. That's a serious problem for us. We joined with several other companies. We formed the Open Web Alliance to preserve the internet as we know it, and we successfully stopped HTTP 2 from having this misfeature. So at least it's not forced, and we're going to continue to lobby for people to be turning off the encryption as often as they can, or just leaving it off, which is the right state of affairs. Okay, there are some other possibilities which are almost as good for us as not having any crypto. For example, there's something called transparent opportunistic encryption, which means that there is encryption, but we can turn it off. It's encryption that's good against everybody who is not the man in the middle. I am the man in the middle. I love this slogan. So we're very happy if people put a lot of effort into opportunistic encryption. Another thing that we're reasonably happy with is having some data signed, something like DNSSEC. DNSSEC signs some data, which doesn't really matter for us. We still can monitor basically everything. DNSSEC is not increasing the amount of encryption. It's just signing some stuff. Okay, and then we can selectively block the things we don't like, or selectively slow down the people who are downloading data from websites that haven't paid us enough to speed up their connections, or whatever else we need to do in order to run the network efficiently. So we don't really care about signatures. Of course, if everything is signed, then that's a little bit of a hassle if we're trying to inject tracking information. But we can send tracking information on the side, and anyway, nobody's talking about signing everything. It's just little bits of signed data, and we can always modify everything else. Okay, so signatures on some data, not a big deal. All right, what else are people doing? Here's the second most serious threat we see, which is end-to-end authenticated encryption. Authenticated means we can't turn it off. Encryption, well, it's actually stopping us from seeing what's inside the packets. End-to-end means we, the network, don't have the keys that we're supposed to have. So what do we do about this? It's actually somewhat of a problem, but most of the time we get enough from metadata. Where the packets are coming from, where they're going to, what the lengths of the packets are, the timing. There's enough information there for us to figure out most of what we need to do to make your life better. And then there's the real nightmare scenario. Now, here's what we're absolutely trying to avoid, which is having a mixture of data from different sources so that we can't even figure out the metadata. The basic picture is there's two users, say Alice and Amber, and they're sending what Tor calls cells, say 512 byte scrambled cells, where every hop that the cells take, they get re-encrypted, and we can't tell which cells corresponding to which. Alice and Amber both send something to, say, a Tor router, one of the Tor nodes, which then sends cells to Bob and to Bruce. And, well, even if we see exactly what the timing was, it's not always clear whether Alice is talking to Bob or to Bruce, whether Amber's talking to which other one Amber's talking to. And then Tor puts several layers of this together, and sometimes people even mix up the packets even more, something called alpha mixing. And this is really messing up our ability to track what's going on the network. So we try to fight against this in superficial ways, like telling people, oh yeah, cells are terrorist cells, and you don't want to be associated with terrorists. And it's great that the name Tor is so close to terror, like, terrorists. This is really scary people. You don't want to be associated with them. And did you know that Tor is 110% filled with child porn? Not that we can tell because we can't look inside it, but that's what we've heard. So what do? Maybe we can get our friends in the government to ban crypto. But the government, you can't really trust them to get anything right. So supposing this fails, what can we do as Verizon? Well, we could try to encourage people to do things that aren't really problems for us. Take all those people who are fascinated by crypto and want to standardize it and want to do something and get them to do opportunistic encryption, which we can just turn off. Great. Or maybe we can tell them to do crypto for, really work hard to encrypt this tiny little bit, which we don't care about. Or maybe we'll tell them, send us the keys. Because, again, we can handle the caching. And, all right, if you really need to do crypto, you can do it. You'd have an encrypted connection to us. We'll see everything, and we'll handle the caching. We'll still be able to do some network management. That's not so bad for us. Well, maybe we tell people all these things, and they don't always bite. Maybe we can distract people into these solutions, which we're kind of okay with. But suppose that doesn't work. It looks like, in some cases, we're not really going to be able to succeed at our jobs unless we can actually break the crypto. Now, sometimes, a lot of times actually, crypto is weak. And that means that we can break it and actually get back to the state of not having crypto. Now, you might wonder, is it reasonable for a communications company to be talking about breaking the crypto if that makes us more money? Absolutely. Yeah, we're happy to break the crypto, and we've got all sorts of partners. This is actually my new job at Verizon, is working with people to sabotage the crypto, to encourage standardization of weak crypto, and then to exploit this, to break it. Some of our partners have some pretty big computer clusters, and I'm looking forward to being able to play with those on my second day of work. Okay, some examples of some things that we've said to manipulate the standardization process, and that'll be everything else I say, and then I'll stop for questions. First of all, performance. Standardization committees love performance because it's something objective. They can make decisions on the basis of performance. And you can't get standards committees to agree on a lot of things, but you can get them to agree that faster is better. So you have, for instance, this wonderful quote from Ron Rivest about how great RC4 is because it's extremely efficient. And that succeeded in keeping RC4 going for many years. And we can do the same for lots and lots of other pieces of crypto, including crypto that we know we can break. Another example is we just fool people about the security. Because standards committees have real trouble evaluating security. Performance is easy, security is hard to measure. So we tell them, yeah, this strong thing, oh yeah, you can't really trust that. Or this weak thing, ooh, this is awesome. This dual EC, it's related to a hard problem. Yeah, you should use dual EC. That was from one of our partners. But it's an inspirational example to be able to deploy this kind of thing. And then we try taking crypto protocols and adding features. Standards committees love adding features. They're almost completely vulnerable to this. We say there's a use case where it's really important to have this feature. Or, oh, there's 6 different ways to handle this crypto. Yeah, we should have all 6 of those options, and 3 of them should be mandatory, and the other 2 should be extensions which are invoked in the following situations, blah, 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 blah. We make everything as complicated as we can, and then we have a protocol that nobody's going to get right. So even if the crypto is something which would be reasonably strong, somebody's going to screw it up because the crypto is so complicated. Crypto doesn't sound super complicated for the user, but we can complicate all the details. And since I have a few minutes, I'd like to dive into some of these details of what we can do to sabotage crypto. So what I'm going to say here, this is from a paper with several authors listed in alphabetical order on the slide. The paper title is How to Manipulate Curve Standards, a white paper for the black hat. The curve standards is referring to elliptic curve cryptography. So here's the standard picture of ECC. I won't have to tell you anything about elliptic curves. There will be some occasional little formulas like this running by. But there's some standard elliptic curve, let's call it E, and some standard point on that curve, call it P. And then what Alice and Bob do to end-to-end exchange a secret key, which they can use with, say, AES to encrypt a bunch of data and authenticate the data, Alice has some long-term public key, which is A times P. A is a secret that Alice came up with, secret random number. She multiplies A times P. Bob has a secret random number B, comes up with B times P. And then Alice takes Bob's public key, B times P, multiplies it by A, gets A times B times P. Bob takes A times P, multiplies by B, and gets B times A times P, which is the same. So they now have a shared secret, and, well, the attacker doesn't have A, doesn't have B. Maybe the attacker could figure out A from A times P. But, well, how hard is that? This is where it gets complicated. It depends on the choice of the elliptic curve. So where does that elliptic curve come from, the standard curve? Well, somebody has generated an elliptic curve. This is the standardization process. This is not included in the normal picture, but this is another part of the process that we can influence. So suppose the curve generator, let's call him Jerry, is generating an E and a P, then can we take advantage of this flexibility of choosing the curve to get Alice and Bob to think they're using strong crypto and actually have crypto that we can just get through really easily? Well, the answer is it depends what the public is willing to accept for the curve E. The obvious thing to do is look at all the complicated literature with some funny named attacks like SmartAss, that's from Nigel Smart and Rocky and Sato and Samayev. It's an attack which says some curves E are bad. And then there's other attacks in the literature. Lots of people have published attacks saying these kinds of curves are bad, these kinds of curves are bad. So, okay, let's assume that the public is going to say, we're going to go through all of those criteria, check them carefully, and say, we'll only take your curve if it passes, if it survives all of those attacks. And any curve that survives all those attacks is okay. Okay, obviously if the public didn't impose this requirement, we could just choose some breakable curve and then we win. Suppose we come up with something that the public hasn't figured out. Suppose we know how to break another curve. Then the public will accept it. So Jerry just takes that curve, standardizes it, and the public takes it. Now you might think, wait a minute, is the public just going to take any curve that somebody on a standards committee comes up with? Well, it depends. We have, for example, in France, the following standard from the ANSI, that's the French National Standards Organization, curve called FRP256V1. This is the standard French elliptic curve to use in cryptography. And this one looks random. There's no justification for it aside from, well, it passes all of those criteria. So nobody knows how to break it. And apparently, the French public, the French standardization agency, the French government are happy to accept this. If France isn't a big enough country for you, how about China? China's done the same thing. And to give proper academic credit, they did it earlier. Okay, maybe the public says, wait a minute, this is unreasonable. Jerry has to show that the curve was obtained by hashing some seed. Because remember, hashing magic crypto pixie dust, this means that Jerry could not have chosen what the curve was to be that weak curve that he found. Lots of examples of this from the US. I won't go through the examples, and the standards say things like verifiably random. That means there was some hashing, so magic pixie dust were good. Parameters cannot be predetermined. Nobody could have chosen a weak curve. And then, well, you look at the details and you see some little formulas with some hash functions which say, here's how you're supposed to hash a seed. So Jerry's supposed to choose a random seed, show you the seed so you can verify this, hash it, and then generate the curve from that seed. The funny thing is the details here are not some obvious mathematical, oh, it clearly has to be done this way. And some other standards took some other hash functions and tweaked this way of generating curves. And I won't go through the formulas, but Brainpool, for example, another curve standard, generates a curve in a different way. So now you should be thinking, okay, if we want to manipulate this process, suppose that we have some weakness that we know in 1 in a million curves, then This is an attack from Mike Scott in 1999. And nobody really listened to him in 1999. What he said was, you could just try generating a whole bunch of curves which meet all the public security properties, assuming you have a big computer cluster. You have to generate lots of curves to find one that meets the public properties, and then you have to do it, say, 1,000,000 times to find a 1 in a million curve that has a particular weakness that you know about and the public doesn't. And okay, we tried implementing this with some GPUs and doing a whole lot of computations to find the 1 in 10,000 curves that satisfy the public security criteria and the 1 in, 2 to the 32 curves that have badass EC at the beginning of the curve. We generated this secure twist secure curve, which is obviously satisfying a very special property to it. Random numbers don't just start by saying badass. All right. I'll just quickly say, there's a brain pool standard which says your seeds have to be systematic and comprehensive. There's a Wikipedia page which says that you should use nothing up my sleeve numbers. You shouldn't just have a random seed. You should use pi. Use the digits of pi, because we cannot influence the digits of pi. And there's a paper on malicious hashing which says that in hash functions you're supposed to have all your constants should be nothing up your sleeves numbers. Microsoft has a nothing up my sleeves proposal which says it's generated deterministically. No choice is possible. And, well, we generated a badass curve, which is a nothing up my sleeves curve. What we actually did was generated 1.4 million curves, which each sound like they have a nothing up my sleeves explanation. Well, they do. The thing is, there's all these possible little tweaks, like Brainpool was using at a certain moment, not pi, they were using exponential of 1. MD5 uses sine of 1. Apparently, the public will accept whatever function of 1. Let's try cosine of 1. There's like 2 bits of flexibility there. And we found some more bits of flexibility here and there and started adding them up, and we got to 1.4 million curves, which is enough for exploiting a 1 in a million vulnerability. All right, I hope that these slides have inspired you to bring your talents to bear to make our lives better. So if you're interested in jobs, I'm afraid there's some US focus to this, but I'm sure there's some similar companies that are working on bringing information to people here in Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dan. We have a few minutes for questions. Jake.
I'd really like to work for you. You've convinced me. Can you tell me what kind of glorious future do I have to look forward to in one of your organizations?
That's a good question. These in the online vertical format, the smaller slide set, these are all links to the job pages, except for the Open Web Alliance, which you have to be a respected member of the community to join. But this is a link to the Xperia jobs page, that's a link to the Verizon jobs page, and that's a link to the NSA jobs page. I think given your history, NSA might not be willing to hire you. However, Verizon has no particular problems with you, and your talents are something that really can be brought to bear against the crypto threat. So I encourage you to go to Verizon, click on careers, and or wait for the slides to be online, and then you can click on the last slide. But we offer a really positive, productive work environment, and we're successful. We're managing to block stupid ideas like HTTP2 encryption. So it's a happy environment, happy family.
In view of time, I will allow one more question. Yeah.
Yeah, so these are obviously not the good ways to make nothing up my sleeve numbers. But how do you generate nothing up my sleeve numbers?
Yeah, oops. All right, am I on? Okay, yeah. That's a very good question. It's not something which is easy to answer. So we're actually joining another author on the paper who's inspecting some ideas for generating nothing up my sleeves numbers and concluding that they're maybe not as nothing up my sleeves as you might think. The more you think about it, the the more you can realize that, yeah, there's all these ways to manipulate things, which is good if you can find a 1 in a million or something weakness. Of course, all of this is predicated on knowing some weakness in curves or whatever kind of standard, which is triggered some of the time that the public doesn't know about. But then once you've found that, then you try to find enough flexibility. And people are really amazingly able to fool themselves as to how rigid and robust their standards are. So fortunately for us, there's no really good answer to this. It seems like standards are really subject to manipulation. Okay?
Okay, please join me in thanking Dan again.